Greetings, everyone. My name is Justin Reich, and I host the CharlesRiverX Colloquium, a partnership between Harvard, HarvardX, the Vice Provost Office of Advances in Learning at Harvard, MIT, MITx, the MIT Office of Digital Learning, the MIT Teaching Systems Lab, anyone else who wants to participate with us. And we're extraordinarily fortunate today to have 3 colleagues from Uruguay be able to chat with us remotely and to give us a sense of some of the work that they are doing that really is an effort to collect some nationwide data about young school-age children's interactions with technology. And there's really some tremendous promise in this widespread data. So we will have a little conversation here online. We'll post this widely afterwards, and so people hopefully will be able to join a growing conversation about what these national level data sets might be able to look like. So let me introduce Cristobal Cobo, and I'll let him introduce himself and his colleagues. And can share that work. We have a few people here in the room, and we may interrupt with some questions as we go along, but mostly we'll turn it over to you, Cristobal. So thank you for being here.
Okay, Justin, thank you very much. Feel free to pop in whenever you want and ask whatever, because that's the idea of having a discussion. My name is Cristobal Cobo, as you said. I'm the director of the Ceibal Foundation. I know that's tricky to say Ceibal in English. It's the national flower here, and it's the name of the program, the World PC program that we are working on. So, my colleagues.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Marconi. I work here at Plan Ceibal, and I am a specialist in analytics and evaluation.
Yes, hi, my name is Juan Jose Goyeneche. That's even harder to say. I work at the Universidad de la República, the university, in statistics.
Cool. Right. So this is the plan. What we have prepared today is an overview of what is this Plan Ceibal as a national scale initiative providing computers to every kid and every school for the last almost 10 years. And then the second part of the presentation will focus on what are we doing and what we're exploring in terms of data analytics and how can we make a better use of the data in order to make data work for us. I still feel that we are working for the data. I'm hopefully waiting that one day data will start working for us and helping us to take better decisions. And we will end up with some of the open questions that we have still in the floor. So let's see if I just need your confirmation that the
We got it.
Okay, awesome.
Metrics that matter.
Wonderful. So as I said, the idea is to give you an overview of what has been going on in terms of this program. It's going to be helpful for you to have a quick overview of some of the initiatives and all the sources of data generation that are behind. And then it's going to be easier to, at least we'll provide a common framework of what are the kind of sources that we are using to do the data crunching and the questions that we are exploring these days. So as I said, briefly, the idea is going to divide this a kind of timeline that also is aligned with the kind of the search questions that we have been exploring in terms of since the creation of this initiative. Short time after Nicolas Negroponte announced with Kofi Annan the One Laptop per Child initiative, what has been going on since 2014 and the current days, and now what are the coming agendas. So let's start with some of the background, a quick overview of the background. We tend to say that we are the first country to provide in a national scale to every single kid and every single school, either connectivity or laptops. Definitely, Uruguay is a small country within Latin America, and it's again with one really tiny in terms of the, for instance, the U.S. population. But so the very first part of the initiative was focused on providing and deploying technology and connectivity and computers. The second bit of the initiative, after that happened, was to develop a number of educational platforms to provide and foster training and learning either within the class or outside of the class, and we provide more details out of that. And now, interestingly, despite that we are a technology initiative, the focus has been much less on providing technology and much more in fostering other ways of using technology, other ways of learning, and we are exploring with all these new pedagogies to try to explore different ways of learning and teaching. And of course, in this case, we're going to focus on different ways of assessing. So the landscape here, we are talking about roughly 700,000 tablets and laptops. According to the age, kids receive different devices. And now, as I was telling Justin just before starting, now they are exploring with elderly and retired people. Now, one of the interesting things that you will see along this experience in this couple of years is if you have a look at the 2006 kind of digital divide, so to speak, it was clearly divided per quintile. Mm-hmm. So low-income people, they were having a really small amount of access to computers, and now after this initiative, that massive gap has been reduced significantly. Now, if you have a look at the same information according to age, you see, of course, kids were having more computers. The blue one is those with the higher income, and the orange one is the one with lower income. And that was, before this intervention, how it was divided according to ages, people with 65 or older with less connectivity. And now this is these days, which at least the digital or the infrastructure bit of the digital gap has been reduced massively. And now, as I said, the focus is also in providing tablets and training to elderly people as well.
And Cristobal, the 6 through 13 age on that last slide, that's like a substantial portion of that the Project Ceibal is responsible for, like the direct provisioning of those computers to kids at those ages?
Absolutely. We provide kids to 17 years old, 16? 15 years old. So according to the age, the older they get, they receive different devices. It's not that you have one device. Probably one difference with other countries is the kids own the laptop or the tablet. It's not in the school. So that helps us in terms of data to have an amazing new layer of information of what are the about at home. But I will go deeper on that. So to give you an overview of some of the landscape in terms of platforms, we have a learning management system where different subjects go there. It's a kind of a model of Facebook where they create communities and they discuss. One of the main platforms is called PAM, in Spanish, Math Adaptive Platform, which provides hundreds of thousands of exercises, and the better the kids are, their skills, the more tough become the exercise. So the software is capable to adapt. There are some digital libraries, as in many other environments. We have this national scale online evaluation that has been conducted for the last 6 or 7 years. So that volume of information is enormous for us. It's around 800,000 kids providing reports a couple of times per year, sorry. We have open education resources. We have a number of robotic staff. Some of these things are being done in collaboration with the Scratch community at MIT. I can provide some outlines out of that. And finally, the English of teaching is another level of collaboration, because it's interesting that we provide the teaching of English through video conferences with teachers from either from Uruguay or elsewhere in the world. And that also is providing a really interesting amount of information. So the teaching of English, because we have a shortage of highly experienced teachers in this topic, we decided to provide, with the support of the British Council, this training through video conferences. Not Skype, is high quality video conferences. And the teachers also, the remote teacher also have a local teacher in the classroom, which might not be expert in English, but who is providing some of the local support. And that has been providing really consistent improvements regardless of the social economical background. We have a growing volume of either digital books or other multimedia resources, and that has been growing in the last few years. We have this interesting platform that I mentioned earlier. It's called Crea2, or Crea, I don't know how to do that in English. It's a learning management system, and as I said, with almost 150,000 students with a very interesting number of interactions behind, in terms of people creating dialogues, communities, exchanges, revising homeworks and stuff. Now this is opening us a new layer of information that we can provide some machine learning to better understand how the language evolved, but this is a matter of another.
And first of all, was that a like a white label of Schoolology, or is it a modification in some way?
It's been tuning a bit. So now we are adapting some stuff, and we are also in a regular base asking some specific data to provide us in order to do some data crunching. So it has a Uruguayan flavor, if you want. Okay. So the other main platform is PAM, as I said, or Adaptive Math Platform. That also is we consider it wildly successful in terms of the amount of exercises. Over 30 million of exercises in a community of over 100,000 students is really interesting. Of course, we have some incredibly intensive users who spend most of their time playing with these exercises, and some very light users as well, and we will provide data out of that. And also we have robotic and all these toolkits that are used for fostering kids. There are coding capabilities, and some of them are more focused on modeling, 3D printings. These are some of the things that are done. Interestingly, and all these technologies that I'm showing in these slides are things that are taking place out of the curriculum because kids want, not because they have to. And that means that the number is not immense, enormous, it's not gigantic, but at the same time, those who are there are entirely advocate to these things. And also we have some competitions and contests and stuff that help us to foster and boost the use of these initiatives in terms of Olympics of math that may sound horribly boring for some of you, but are really, really popular here, and the same likewise with robotic and coding. Earlier, a couple of years ago, and now they're continuing this year, they're running some MOOCs which teach kids and teachers how to do coding with Scratch and other technologies, and that evolved now into the Coursera program. And this is the online evaluation. It's not a traditional evaluation in terms of you receive a score at the end. It's a much more summative, a formative assessment, which the idea is to trace the evolution of the learner, and it's designed to provide feedback to the teachers to see how well they're doing. So you don't see any score out of that, and we are not in the line of crossing those data with other performances, because it's not the spirit of this assessment to see the level of completion. But not everything is flowers and roses. There are some challenges, very strong challenges, that I think is important to give you in order to frame the discussion. The education system in this country, as far as I know, is one of the unique that is increasing the level of dropout in middle education. And that's not good at all, because the numbers are really, really high. So as you can see here, only 70% of children who start in middle school are able to complete the cycle. And only 40% of the students who start high school are able to graduate. So the number of kids that we lose along the process is incredibly high, and we will show now in a minute how we are crossing this data with the online behavior, and we want to see if there are some connections or not. So in terms of present, and I'm about to leave the floor to my colleague, in terms of present, we have, based on those platforms that I mentioned earlier, a gigantic amount of information, really interesting because it's a national scale, as Justin said at the beginning. And of course, we don't want to find correlations between the amount of clicks and the scores, which could be interesting. It's not bad to do that, but we are in a stage that we think for us it's more important today to understand how kids are learning in different platforms, in different moments, either in the school or at home. And of course, many of those learning processes are taking place out of the computer or any kind of bring your own device environment. So we can have a light picture of that, but with quite diverse sources of information. And since learning is a social process, most of the quality value is based on the interaction that those kids may have. there is this really interesting paper from Siemens and Dragan Hasevich and Stephen Downes that they were stressing the idea that the risk of automating the learning outcome and generating some predictions that can provide a partial picture. So we have been focusing, as I said, much more, and you will see now in a minute, much more in the learning process. What has been going on? What kind of interactions? When they get online, what platform do they use? Do they have a common pattern in different platforms? And then to see whether or not if there are correlations with some other activities. I don't know if Justin, you remember, but when Stephen Down presented this talk in this wonderful island that we were in this meeting, he was talking about the deep analytic. And I got stuck into this idea because so far we had analyzed the statistic based on independent platforms. And with this deep analytic perspective, he was suggesting that it's much better idea, or can be much more interesting, to understand behaviors throughout different platforms, either education platforms or no educations at all. And of course, that brings another level of complexity in terms of privacy. But we are exploring ever since in this idea of a kind of 360 degrees perspective, and my colleague will provide you more details out of that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't speak quickly like Cristobal, but I will do my best.
That's fine for us.
Okay, so all of the platform and management system that Ceibal implements generates a great amount of data. So this matrix of data is to share with you what kind of data that we have. I mean, we have a different source of data. The principal source is a core information system. It's a system through Ceibal management, all of the relationship between the beneficiaries and the information that is associated with them. For example, we have socio-demographical features like the age, the gender, sociocultural context, location, if the school is allocated in a urban area or in a rural area. Also, we have information related to the infrastructure, like the type of internet access, the ID of the device, the model of the laptop, and the data that we deliver this device. Another dimension is related to the technical support, I mean the service that we give into the schools. And we have all of the ticket tracking about the failures of the device, when and which type of failure has. Also, we are monitoring the performance of the IT infrastructure. So in that way, we have the traffic of the internet, the busy traffic, the number of clients, and the network availability. Sorry. You want to say something? No? We have the school server logs that the internet give us the internet performance of the internet activity. Unfortunately, currently we don't identify these logs with each student. We are working on this. We have the logs of the school. I mean, it's a data that is a level school. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then we are developing a tracker system. This track system is implemented in a stratified sample. And the tracker, the aim of the tracker is to report in a remote way the time of the usage, the overhead system, and the applications that the students are using in the classroom or out the classroom. It depends on the hours. I mean, but this is a system that we are developing. We are in the second version, and the idea is to expand all of this system to all of the models of the device that we have in the schools. And as Cristobal says, we have the data that comes from the platforms like the learning management systems, and there we have the traditional variables like the number of comments that the students post in the platform, the submissions, how many how many active users we have, and the number of files uploads, and the IP address. The online evaluation that Cristobal have recently mentioned, the adaptive the math adaptive platform. So we have the number of exercises that each student have done in the platform, and indicators like the success rate or the time of their usage. And the Teaching English, that is a system that we assign remote teachers to the groups. We are exploring this data too. This project, I mean, teach in Ceibal, we hire remote teachers, and we can recall the video conference. So we are developing a study, a research about to identify these practical characteristics of these remote teachers that associate with the performance of the student. So as you can see, we have a high-dimensional variety of data sets. Now we are talking about structured data, but we also can get unstructured data. Currently, we are not extracting and process this type of data. We could, but it's not our reality now. But we would like to have another type of data that we call missing data that we don't have. For example, the socioeconomic context, because we have the sociocultural context that is a very, very important variable to define the performance of the student, but it's a school level data. So also we don't have much information about the teacher. For example, the teacher preparation or the teacher training. So we are about all of these sources. We are working on how we can improve how can improve the integration of these different sources in a comprehensive and meaningful way, okay? And to start to analyze, okay? But when, while this infrastructure is developing, we start to analyze and explore, so we are in an early stage of the analysis of this data. Next slide. So we first start with these questions. We would like to answer this question. Can we identify profiles of user participation? I mean, we can find patterns of online activity, or is there any correlation between the level of students' online participation and their performance, means the scores? Or could we identify any correlation between student participation online and their record of school attendance? So to approach these questions, we start to analyze a data set that focus on fifth grade of the students at primary school. Here in Uruguay, that means a student at 10 years old. I mean, so we are analyzing the activity of these students on the platforms. And as you can see, in 2015, the 65% of the user has logged in the LMS, but 35% of the students didn't do it. So one of the questions that arise is the profile of these two groups, okay? So when you begin to look the data more closely, you see that there are different levels of engagement. For example, only the 25% of the students have left at least one comment in this year. Yeah. So
just one question.
Yes.
This is the whole national fifth graders, right?
Yes. Yes.
How big is that?
It's around 44,000 students.
Okay. Cool.
So
That's the public
schools.
Public schools.
Mm-hmm. So to go on in these questions, if we look the percentage of access coverage intra-group, it's a significant finding relating to the pattern in the use of the platform. What you have is, in one hand, you have a significant number of groups that never log in the platform, and in the other hand, you have another significant groups that log in the platform. I mean, that graph suggests us that the teacher is a crucial factor to determine or to define the level of students' engagement. Moreover, when we see the percentage of access in the school, we find some similar pattern. And this is related to the Ceibal support teacher that we have in the school, but we don't have this support teacher in all of the school.
It's a professional profile that is going to every school and providing help.
Yes, the idea of the Ceibal support teacher is a traditional teacher, but is trained by Ceibal. And the aim of this teacher is to work in the school with the teaching staff to help them to introduce the technology into the classroom and work with all of these platforms. And as you can see, the average of the percent access coverage in the groups with, or the school with work with this support teacher is higher than the groups without this support teacher.
Can we point it?
To clarify, is this when you say access?
Yep.
This is actually meaning something closer to like they used it, they logged in. That everyone could log in if they wanted to, that the infrastructure is there. But when you say access, you mean that they actively logged in?
It's only when they log in the platform, and only the beneficiaries of Plan Ceibal can get into in this platform, okay?
But in theory, all of the people who are at 0, they have some kind of device, they have internet access, like they should in theory be able to get into the platform, just they and their teachers have decided not to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have the opportunity, just they didn't log in the whole year.
And that also raises a lot of questions of who are those guys, and it's a kind of missing data that we can somehow explore because we have some information. Okay,
so one of our goals with Cristobal and Juanjo is how to build an engagement index. I mean, we have a methodological question, but we build a preliminary version of the index. One of the questions that we arise is, which are the key variables to consider to construct the index? In our case, we start to consider the number of comments, the number of submissions, and the number of files, and how many days, different days that the students do these comments of submission, etc. So after we define these variables, we took logarithmic transformation, and then another question is, what should be the weighting of each individual variable? I mean, because a priori we don't know. In our case, we consider the same weighting for each variable. But another thing that we are thinking on is about the quality of the usage. I mean, we would like to have or to introduce in the index dimension quality. Maybe this involves to analyze the comments and the quality of the work that the students do into the platform, maybe by natural language processing or working with the unstructured data. But fortunately, I don't have to read 100 comments of 10-year students in the school, but we would like to introduce this dimension in the index. And about the Ceibal math adaptive platform, only we consider in this early stage the number of exercise, and we take a logarithmic transformation. So even we have all the next plot incorporate both index and allow to see the number and profiles of students who are engaging with both platforms or not. We try to draw the medium line, but
we clearly failed. At least with the LMS engagement, Either that green vertical line is not the median, or we confuse the concept of median.
But because we are too open, we share our mistakes as well.
The idea of this graph is in a certain way to form quadrants of low intensive users in the LMS platform, and at the same time intensive versus light users in the LMS platform versus the same in the math platform, right?
Mm-hmm. So the idea is the next step is zooming in this data and better understand this profile of these students. So next slide. Oh no, it's here. This, sorry. We would like also to
the English teaching.
Yes, we would like to approach if there is any correlation between the performance score and the level of student online participation. So in the y-axis, you have the performance in the adaptive English test that we took in last year. And okay,
in English.
Yes, in English. So through the different variables of the LMS platform, and as you can see, all of these variables are positive and correlated with the performance, but the variable which best correlate with English performance is a number of uploads that the students have done. The 14% of the variability of the performance is explained by this variable.
It's the upper right one.
Yeah. So as you can see, we are in an early stage of the analysis, but we are the idea is
Continue working.
Sorry. So Juanjo, let's comment this another.
Which are what? These diagrams, and the next one.
This.
Yes, I know. It's about where. Then we took a cohort of 6th graders in 2013. Okay, so these were the 42,000 students that in 2013 were in 6th grade. That's the final grade of primary school, of elementary school. Yep. And then they moved to, yes? Oh, and then they moved to middle school, which is 3 years, and then high school, which is another 3 years. It's a huge gap. In elementary school, in Uruguay at least, there is no dropouts during the 6 years of elementary school, okay? Most of the kids are in school, close to 99% of the kids are in school, either public or private, but these are the kids in public schools. But when they move to middle school, that's different. So the light green is the kids in the first column is the kids in 6th grade. Then they move to, some of them repeat 6th grade, which is let me see if this little line here are the kids that repeat 6th grade. These ones are the ones that go to 1st, 7th grade, you would say in the United States, or 1st year of middle school. Here, this is a small brown line. I don't know if you can see it. That is other kinds of schools, technical schools or so. And these gray ones, this gray part, is kids that we cannot find in public schools. That's either because they don't go to a private middle school, or they disappear from the system, or they go to private middle schools. Okay. In the next year, in the year 2015, 60% of the kids that were in 6th grade in 2013, they are in 2nd year of middle school. These ones repeat 1st grade, and the others, the brown line and the gray here, they are either in other kind of schools or they drop out from the public system. Missing data, exactly. In the next slide is a comparison between the girls and the boys in the same graph, but girls and boys, and it's a huge difference between them. Not only in the percentage that finally end up in 2nd year, 2 years later of being in 6th grade, and now are in 2nd year of middle school, but also in the missing data, right? The missing data here is much higher than the missing data here. Finally, here is a table that prints in some sense, the percentages that we saw in the previous diagrams. And for instance, up here is the total population of public kids in 6th grade in 2013. Up here in the middle is the first quintile, which is the schools with less resources, and here is the 5th quintile, which is the schools in better shape, right? So here we have the average repeating percentage in 6th grade, and here we have the kids that repeat 1st grade in, oh, excuse me. Here are all the kids in 6th grade, and where they go after 1 year. 80%, 81% go to the 1st year in middle school. 17% of them are missing data, right? And 1% repeat 6th grade. The same, the next year, the kids in 1st grade, 18% repeat 1st grade of middle school. That's different. That average up there is clearly different for the socio-cultural environments, right? The kids in schools with more or less resources have a higher rate of repeating than the kids in the other extreme of the social economics, exactly, schools. But here is in the first, their performance in 1st grade of middle school, which is higher, right? In the schools, the poor schools, than in the other. With respect to the missing data, we have an average of 1 of every 6 kids disappear, and we don't know where they go. And there is a huge difference between the school with less resources, which is practically the same than up there, and is that the schools in the elementary schools with more resources. These kids, this percentage is much higher, 26%. What is the mouse? This, even that this percentage is much higher, that's more likely that these kids will go to private schools after elementary school, right? But we don't have that information yet.
Wonderful. So just to wrap up, in which stage are we looking forward? So the first one is, okay, we have all this data. We haven't published most of the things. We are still in the process of internal analysis, but we need to bring a number of strong policies, because regardless that we have the access to the data, we need to provide consistent policies that, one, we will be sure that we don't cross any ethical issue has to be a lot of transparency of what are we doing with the data. We have plenty of responsibility because some of these data are generated by kids who are early stage. And I mean, we're having a look at the Open University. They have interesting ethical use of students' data guidelines. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Alan Turing Institute in the UK, which also is working in big data initiatives. And the very first call that they opened is a research assistant in data ethics. So I think that is kind of highlighting us in which direction we should move. And this is something definitely that we need to have a closer look. As I was mentioning, Justin, we are very excited because just a few weeks ago, we got this confirmation from the Inter-American Development Bank in cooperation with the Poverty Fund program from Korea, that they will provide us some support to create this national scale learning analytics center. And we are entirely open to people who can be interested to do some data crunching or exchanges of this collaboration that's going to be for the next 2 years. So some of the key questions to finish, and this is the very last slide, are one, you saw some hints here, but there's still some work to do, plenty of work to do in terms of can we identify any kind of correlation between the face-to-face patterns and the online practices? Because we have the national scale, we can compare that and we can see if we can, one, identify correlations, two, see if we can provide some kind of notifications, alarms, or warnings, things that may help us to react before it's too late, before we lose those kids. The second thing, as Cecilia mentioned a minute ago, is most of the big data analysis it's not big data, but it's large scale data at least, has been focused on quantitative and structured data, and we tend to think that unstructured data can tell us a lot. That's for one side, and the second side is how can we complement this information that we take from the data, from the stats, with other more qualitative data in the ground or with teachers' feedback or this kind of perspective that can complement and enrich the analysis. There's plenty of questions open and things that are really in the concern from the work that we are doing in terms of transparency, privacy, and security of all this information. We are in the process of defining some anonymization rules. We haven't, as I said, released any report because we tend to think that there's plenty of responsibility behind. And finally, all the literature suggests that teachers need to be included in this process in an early stage, because later on, I can draw you to a wrong conclusion. So we are in this process. Next week, we will have an event with teachers in order to discuss this thing and explain that learning analytics is not the same that Big Brother, but it's an opportunity to enrich, enlarge, and diversify what we understand by learning and by outcome. Most of this information is publicly available. I mean, not those reports, certainly, but some of the guidelines and the team behind and the priorities that we have in the website of the Fundación Ceibal. So this is 40 minutes plus one. Sorry for the extra minute, and hand you.
We asked questions. It was our fault.
No, that's all fine. So I'll get back to the share screen, if that's okay.
Ah! Very dramatic. That's a great way to end. Good. So I don't know if people here have questions that they want to ask. I mean, I'll start with one about the sort of privacy and ethics. How does, you gotta stop sharing your screen or it'll look like we're falling into a giant wormhole. What's your sense of what students and parents currently know about the data that you're collecting, and what's the kind of like legal or contractual framework under which you get it? So is it, there's got to be some national regulation which is responsible for getting a computer in each kid's hands, and then do students and parents sign off on data collection, or are they just told like this is kind of a national initiative, and or like what do people know? I get, you know, what kind of onboarding do families have as they get devices and participate in school every year? And then if you went to sort of a random parent in a random town and said, who has access to the computer data about your kid, what do you think they would say?
Who wants to answer that? The only signature thing that they implement last year was with the Google service. So when they provide the Google suite of Google Apps for Education, we implement this data consent or privacy consent from parents through a remote system by SMS. So you provide information, and if parents agree to use that their kids will be using that platform, they had to provide this consent by mobile. Mm-hmm. Regarding the rest of the platforms, no, internally, as far as I know, this is something, although it has not been released to anyone, has not reports being published, but we know by sure that if we want to create reports and provide some guidelines, we will need to find a mechanism to write the consents, appropriate consents to them.
Yeah, I mean, like in the United States, we take like a whole bunch of kids in the U.S. have to take this test called the National Assessment of Education Progress. And we, the data gets protected. We do all kinds of things with it. It's enshrined in federal law. And like parents don't sign a form that say my kids can take the National Assessment of Education Progress. They don't give permission or whatever. It's just a law that everybody has to take this test, and they got to tell us what their name is. And there's a federal agency that collects all that data, and they release it in a de-identified kind of way. So there's certainly precedent in other countries to just say like, but like that's a one-time test versus sort of ongoing collection, that might have location data about kids, that has other activities and so forth. So I mean, it's interesting to think about under what conditions do people participate in this research, and how are they, I mean, in some ways they're included in the decisions through like your national democratic process. Like if the people in the country didn't like this plan, they could vote, your government officials out of office and have somebody else put in a different one or something.
Absolutely. I think this is a highly sensitive issue in the US here and elsewhere. A lot of access to information requires a lot of responsibilities as well. So what we have decided is we went to the national agency which deal with data privacy and all these matters, a bunch of lawyers, and we said, guys, give us the guidance in order to proceed because we don't want to break any rule.
Mm-hmm. Good. Other questions that people have about what's going on, or?
I'm interested in the funding of this and how the funding.
Can you get closer to the microphone, please?
I can repeat the question too.
And how the funding compares to the whole budget for education.
Good. So the question is sort of what are the sources of funding for the Project Ceibal broadly, and then how, like, what's the percentage of national education funding that this technology initiative represents?
0.3%
Of the educational
of
budget.
the GPA. No,
Or the education.
gasto público en educación.
Public spending in education is
3.
0.3. We are still under the $100 per device, which includes certainly not only the device, but also all the backup training, supporting and fixing the computers and all that.
Mm-hmm. And what's like so the whole program is less than $100 a kid. Like do you have a sense of what Uruguay's national spending per kid is on education?
In elementary, in middle, in what? No, I don't have that number.
No, we don't have that number in our minds.
Your heads.
Yeah.
Those are public figures anyway. We can prove them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the general question, which I'm sure you've gone with these kinds of a bunch, is like how much of technology, what proportion of the budget is technology, and does it seem to be giving a return on investment on that proportion of the budget is probably the sort of like motivating feature behind the question.
Right, but the
0.3%.
I guess 0.3 can give you an overview of this is not a massive part of the national budget.
Yeah.
But I mean, returns on investment I have issues with that. I don't know if any country has been found a way to really measure that in terms of if you can find currencies out of that, because I mean, there's a social. How can you trace for instance, the employability skills that the parents of those kids developed when this device came to their houses. It's really, really tricky. You can provide some proxies, but it hardly will be a reliable figure. This is my personal view.
Yeah, no, good. Other questions that folks have?
I had a question. Are you all working to think about how you could provide some of this data to teachers in something, not like real time, but necessarily, but quickly enough that they could act on it to change, what they're doing? I know you said it's extracurricular, and you mentioned the possibility of doing notifications of at-risk students, but I was wondering if there were other ways that you are looking at how can we take this data and present it to teachers in a way that's actionable for them?
You want to answer that? So that's a great question. And there's a number of ways of answering that. I mentioned the online assessment that we conduct every day for the last 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Those teachers, they have the feedback right away as soon as the kids finish, because it generates immediate response, and teachers can either aggregate or disaggregate according to the kid class or school. So that the feedback is immediate. Now, with this kind of much more complex 360 degrees, this is something that is in such an early stage that we won't be in a good shape to provide. But we understand that it won't make sense to have these beautiful dashboards if those things are not translated into something that can help teachers. So I guess in that sense, there are two challenges that we are facing today. One is to explain that this is, as I said, it's not only to surveillance, it's to help them. And that will mean a sort of co-designing with them, because there might be some resistance. I may understand if you use it only to punish some guys who are not behaving well, but this is not the goal of it at all. And the second thing is, the second challenge is to translate all these big data, numbers and figures into meaningful information. That, I guess, the word visualization came to my mind, in order to have something that can be complex into something that is simple and straightforward and can, in a simplified way, help them. But this is, I guess, it's going to be part of this program that I mentioned now that we're going to do
with the Koreans and with the Inter-American Development Bank. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like one of these sort of enormous questions in the field of, I mean, especially since you have such close relationships to the K-12 educators, which are part of the same system. This question of, it's probably not hard to provide them with lots and lots of data, and then if a lot of times what dashboards do is simplify things to the point where they say, oh, John can't read. Well, of course John can't read. That's why he's in school. That's why he's sitting in front of this software program. I don't even know he can't read. I need to know exactly what he can read, exactly what he can't read, what I should be doing next, in such a way that sort of becomes actionable. And that's a enormous challenge, but probably no one else has national level data on all of the children to be able to start addressing some of those challenges. Natively, do teachers right now have any data at all? Like so they have data from the online evaluation of English. Do they have data from the math program? When students do activities in the math program, do they know where, is that connected to teacher accounts in some way, or is it just student data right now?
Nice.
Retornos.
I mean, the teachers can design the test in the platform, in the math platform, but it's not a national test. I mean, but they can look at, I mean, the result, yes, in the real time.
So they're already getting some sort of information from those.
I mean, depends on the engagement of the teacher with the platform also, because some teachers will say, okay, open the platform and start to do exercise, and another things about the series of the exercise. I mean, it depends of the engagement of the teacher with the platform.
That's right, but technically it's possible.
Yes, technically it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Good. Other questions that people have? Or as you all are thinking about, partnerships with Korea or partnerships with other people, or doing more hiring, sort of what are the skill sets that you're hoping to develop? Like, what other kinds of human resources do you wish you had? What other kinds of people do you wish you had to be able to help address these challenges and so forth? What are some, like, if you could pull together your dream team of people to help you do this work, who would be some of the people who are on the dream team?
well, I guess the word that came to my mind is obviously data scientist, but this is such an hybrid profile because it involves everything, right? People who can do some computer science, algorithm, work a bit on visualization. But I guess now we are in the stage, of course, some of the things that we show to you are not final results, are preliminary, but even doing this crunching for preparing this presentation, we realized the gigantic amount of work that we have to do to clean the data, better integrate them from different platforms and different languages. And that is a boring, not exciting part at all, but that requires a lot of attention now for this early stage now.
I mean, that was definitely the case with Harvard and MIT, that, you know, in order to be able to, I mean, I love that phrase you had at the beginning of right now we're working for the data and we're trying to get to the point where the data is working for us. I mean, just working out of one platform, it was an enormous amount of work to, you know, like multiple computer scientists working together, lots of time to be able to get things to the point where you go, oh, like this is starting to tell us something, like we know that everything is here, and like we can put it in one format that computer scientists can use, and a second format that social scientists can use, and people can make requests, and you know we can deliver on those requests. I mean, it was years of work to be able to, because then, you know, typically, I don't know if this is your experience, but like most learning management systems or online learning experiences are designed for people to be able to have some kind of learning experience online, and then there's like some kind of tracking which is going on in the background, usually sort of in the tradition of like debugging code rather than in the tradition of like, rather than really as a product, like a research product that the service is trying to deliver. And so you sort of have to take this like data, which is in weird shape in all kinds of ways coming off the back end. And in your case from, you know, it sounds like 6 different platforms or something like that, and try to figure out how to map it all to one another, whether or not it's accurate, you know, what things mean, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it sounds like you have a, you know, enormous engineering challenge just to be able to pull all that together in one place.
Have you seen just in initiatives like in that sense? I mean, regardless of the scale, I mean, trying to understand behaviors throughout different platforms and not specific in one specific environment.
I mean, I think the only people who, like the people it seems to me who are doing the most of that are some of the sort of like social network analysis researchers, people who do CMOOC kinds of stuff, but they rarely do it through platforms. They do it through people. They do things like, hey, person, you know, can we pay you $25 and will you give us like logins to your Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you know, whatever accounts. And then for 100 people or 150 people, you know, they get that kind of data. Rather than saying, all right, we're going to pull everything that you've done off Khan Academy and we're going to connect that to everything that you've done off, you know, Carnegie Learning, connect that to everything that you've done off something else. In fact, there, you know, there was a conference at Harvard last year or 2 years ago that was sort of a bunch of folks in America who were kind of schools that were sort of leading people in blended learning and in using computer software and things like that. And they were saying that like that was one of their main challenges that they were basically finding impossible, was that they couldn't get any of the software to talk to one another. They couldn't get all the data into sort of one consistent format. I remember distinctly one administrator saying like, my life has become, I'm a human API. Like I basically like download a bunch of spreadsheets and like crunch the data myself and then give it back to people. So yeah, I think that's one of the, you know, and that presumably if you're stitching together these different products, like, you know, at the very least, most providers don't care whether or not their data is compatible with other sources. And then in a handful of cases, there are probably people who like really intentionally would like their data to be not super compatible with other sources. So you get sort of like stuck into their platform. So it seems like the challenges that you're dealing with here are pretty cutting edge in that respect. And they're not super sexy either. Like the guy we ended up hiring at Harvard to do the data engineering, he was a former, he worked at Boeing. I guess like every time an F-16 goes for a flight, it comes back with half a terabyte of data. And that was sort of, he was like, well, I could, you know, it's probably more interesting to look at what learners are doing than what fighter planes are doing. And so it came and worked for us, but that's the, you know, there's a lot of unsexy blocking and tackling to put these things together.
I love that human API. I think I feel like we are just that.
Yeah, you three are the API there.
You can. This can be some material for your next coding Olympics, and then you can hire the winner.
That's right. That's an excellent idea. Well, good. So Cristobal and maybe some of his colleagues are going to be at MIT in May, hopefully for the Link conference here at MIT. I don't know, you can put up your slide again there at the end so we can find your contact information, but I'll send it to folks as well. But it's great to hear about the work that you're doing. Hopefully people who are interested in it will reach out to Cristobal and see if we can get together when you're here in May. But I think this initiative is sort of incredibly exciting, and I don't know anything else in the world that's quite like it. Even at not just at a national level, but even at a sort of state or provincial level. So to see that sort of Uruguay is kind of pioneering work in national one-to-one laptop initiative is extending to this sort of national learning analytics initiative seems really fascinating to me, and I'm grateful to you all for coming by and sharing what you're learning about it.
Well, likewise, we are very happy for having this invitation. We enjoyed a lot giving the talk. It brought us a lot of headaches. We have a lot of exciting conversations, but hopefully this thing has brought us a kind of interesting roadmap to move into the future, and we'll be delighted to continue in contact. So thank you very much for the invitation.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. Really nice to chat with you. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We applaud on this end.